Chinese luxury goods market is one of the biggest in the world. I'm sure you all know that. But when Angelica, who've just seen here, over here, was aged just 36, she went out to persuade Condé Nast to start Vogue China. And people doubted whether that was a good business decision. And they said they didn't think that anybody would buy it. And they asked if China could ever be a nation of fashion. It's funny now when you think about it today. But this former Goldman Sachs investment banker, which is what Angelica is, was absolutely right. And her first issue of Vogue China sold out of its initial print run of 300,000 and had to be reprinted twice. And that was just her start.
And here to interview her, please welcome back. I introduced him this morning with some of the stuff he'd done on the front line of terrorism and reporting. This time it's taking a slightly different angle. He's the World Affairs editor of BBC News. He's also was recently named by GQ as one of the best dressed men in Britain. Please welcome back John Simpson. You want to?
Where am I? There?
These two, yeah. Whichever way around you would like to go.
Okay.
Which is your best side?
Thank you. I think the back is probably my best. Very nice. Well, it's lovely to see you. I think people know exactly who you are by now, but just to repeat that at a very young age, I'm not going to say which, you became the editor of Vogue China. And at that stage, I think it's fair to say, it wasn't anything very special, was it? It was just a kind of offshoot of Vogue proper. And you turned it in the space of 10 years into a really important and scene-changing magazine, which now people follow quite slavishly. I have to say that the first contact I really ever had with China was to do with fashion. In 1978, a very fleeting leader of China, Hua Guofeng, visited the outside world. The first time that any Chinese leader throughout China's immensely long history had ever gone abroad. And of all strange places, forgive me, the Romanian delegate here, but he decided to go to Romania. Wasn't quite clear why. And I knew very little about China in those days, but I was standing there on the tarmac as the plane arrived with Hua Guofeng in it. And Hua Guofeng came out of the plane door to come down the steps, and a woman came out behind him. She was, I think, just his translator. And all these China experts that I was standing among, journalists and diplomats, all had a great intake of breath because she was wearing a brown Mao suit. Now, you only, at that stage, wore black or dark blue.
So the brown one was a rebel.
One was an amazing fashion statement that changed everything. Well, as we know now, of course, that is what was the change of everything. Yes. Tell me, I mean, there's a lot of people in the audience here who'll be very interested in fashion anyway. Tell me a little bit about how you managed to turn Vogue China into something that was a brand leader instead of just being a sort of translation of the...
Well, yeah, well, this is young people here. I mean, I was considered young a while ago. Now you feel you're speaking to young people.
Very young, yes.
And I think the thing is, you know, Vogue is a brand that everybody obviously knows around the world. But 11 years ago, when I was asked to launch Vogue in China, and in China it was pretty much zero recognition. People didn't know the brand, like they didn't know the names of a lot of fashion brands. They could name probably
2 or 3 or 3 or 4, and that was about it. And so you were facing a country that did not know the brand name, unlike elsewhere in the world, and also there's a huge gap between the reality of the market at the time, how people knew about fashion and how Vogue should be in terms of fashion. But also at that time, I was going through a funny period in my life. I had been editing fashion magazines before. I was editing Elle China in China. And before that, I was editor of Marie Claire in Hong Kong. And before that, there were a few other things. And as I was talking to someone just now, that actually it was meant to be a temporary thing, because I was going to be always wanting to be a barrister in Hong Kong, a lawyer. So I thought being in the media and play for a few years would make me more worldly. You see the world, you meet a lot of people, you understand how things work, and then you would go back, you become a good lawyer and confident and all that. So I was going through that funny period when I was about to leave that business for the fifth time effort to go back to do this updating course and then take a serious job actually. And that's when Condé Nast came to say that, why don't you launch Vogue? I said, no, it's not in the plan anymore. I'm getting old, and it's my last chance to go back to where I was supposed to do. And then I think after a lot of discussion, they just said, you must be mad. You'll regret it if you don't do it. And, I bet that will happen. Think again. So what would make you, more interested in it? I just said something of just like that. I just said, you know what, if you let me produce a magazine that would be on the level of, say, American Vogue, British Vogue, top Vogues in the world, then maybe I would be interested. Well, the sort of background of that was that in China and in Asia in general, a lot of delegates from Asia, is that these international titles, Asian editions, were always a cheaper version of the original. So you syndicated heavily second-hand materials from other editions, and you produce very cheaply locally, and you put that label on to call it this international title. And so you felt okay when you were local there, but when you were together with the international family, you just felt like a poor cousin in the family. So I sort of felt enough. I thought I did the best I could, but it was a strategy issue, and I thought that was it. I'll do something else. But that is Condé Nast. They just said that's exactly what I want to hear. China is such a big country. It deserves a top-level magazine that would represent its power and potential internationally. So that was the background of it. And eventually, if you look back to the past 10 years, that was what made us successful from day one, was that you aimed really high and you tried to bring in something new that is very different from what existed at the time. And the only game at that point was to execute it and actually realize that goal. Now it's sort of easy. I always say, yeah, we had a plan. It was really the plan that made it different, the approach different, because the market was there, the other competitors, they were all in China long before Vogue went in. So some titles have been there 20 years, 30 years, 10 years. But when Vogue went in, we went from right to there. And
you've got.
But luckily, is that because the country was experiencing such a fast growth. So by the time 10 months later we launched the magazine, the market also grew, the readers grew.
You've
so
got 1.6 million, is that right?
Well, depending on how you calculate, I mean, business of fashion put our influence audience as to some kind of a 60 million or something, 26 million. Yeah. So we call the magazine itself is 1.3 million. And then our mobile app and WeChat, we have another 1.3 million. And then social media was like 6 million, and we have other things. So now when we talk about Vogue, it's really the all-rounded Vogue. We were actually the first one to go beyond the print magazine and to create a more, well, what do you call it? It's a sexy word at the moment, a 360-degree ecosystem, but it's true in our case that we actually are doing that, and it's all working at the time.
Can I ask you one of those aggressive journalistic questions that you know, tend not to come up, in fact, in an area like this? But we've been listening to stories about people walking 50 miles to get water. We've been listening to stories about countries which may soon be submerged under the waves. Is it, I mean, isn't fashion a bit frivolous compared with the problems of society?
All my life have been facing this question. Actually, I asked myself this question before, and that was part of the reason why, you know, originally I didn't mean it to be my lifelong career, because when you're young, you're idealistic, you just thought that you were helping a group of the population, and then there was like a whole big group of population that probably needed another type of help and more help. And you know, sometimes in retrospect, I would rather be, I don't know, a doctor maybe, who saves lives. But later on, the more you get into the profession, the more your mind changed. Well, on the one hand, I have to say that, you know, you as a person, you have to choose something, and you can't solve all the world's problems. You know, we have so many problems. Like today, environmental issues really inspires me. I probably would like to do more about it, but doesn't mean I would devote my life to only that. So each of us needs to choose something that you believe in. So good about this business is that I think there's a perception of the fashion business that is frivolous. It is to a certain degree. It is, at the end of the day, is about how to put a few pieces together, you know, what handbags to buy and what shoes to match your outfit. But that is one level. And the reason why I actually have been doing this for so long, and I'm still passionate about it, is actually related to what made us successful in the first place, is that from day one I took on the job, I didn't see it as just a fashion catalog or a fashion magazine. The reason why I'm still passionate about building up mobile, like next year I'm launching a younger product, is because 10 years ago, or actually about 8.5, 9 years ago, after the first year of the launch, we were like, no competition, unique platform, everything. All the money came in, advertising, everything. After that, I experienced another period of doubt to say that, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? You know, photographing beautiful girls in beautiful clothes, thinking of nice photographic approach maybe. You know, it's interesting, it's creative, but is that all I'm going to do? You know, just like that. So I went through a dull period thinking about what to do with my life next after the success. Then at that time, I had my daughter. Yeah, so very later on in my life, and decided last minute to have a daughter who's like really my life now at the moment. But then I started to think, I had a bit of panic attack because I was an older parent. So I thought, God, I need to leave the job. I need to do something else. I need to make a lot of money because she's the only child. I need to buy properties. I need to invest and all that so that she would be safe if I'm not around anymore one day. So I was thinking of that. And then I thought, actually, no. However much money you leave her, if she's not a strong person, it's not going to help her. Then I started to think, no, there are other ways to how to help your daughter to become a stronger person so that she can survive very well one day when me and my husband were not around. I think that's what you do when you're a parent. You think about your children. So then I thought, okay, instead of trying to make a lot of money, which I'm still trying to, I thought, I should try to educate her, influence her into becoming a kind of a woman that would be strong enough to survive on her own. So I thought, what would be the woman, the elements of that? So I thought, okay, she needs to be a very positive kind of a thinker, because we have so many troubles around the world. Even the past 30 minutes, you heard about all the depressing, elements of life. So you need a very positive outlook on life in order to keep going, to enjoy, embrace your life. Then I thought she needed to be a loving person. It's not something like politically correct, but it's true because she's a single child. No siblings, no families probably in future. And what you do is that, you need friends around you. So in order to win friends, you must be a loving person to start with. So I thought that was important. And then I thought she needs to have a little bit of a courage, because every day we're facing challenges, not like a hero, but a little bit of a challenge to take a little bit of risk once in a while. And then most importantly, I thought you have to have certain contribution to the world, because I know so many rich people who actually are not very happy people, because the money cannot buy your happiness. True.
I always
You have
love
to
to hear
feel you are needed, whether it's your neighbor or your parents or your friends or the world, like our speakers here, and then you need to do something. And that would be sort of a person, if she becomes that kind of a woman, plus she knows how to dress, she's beautiful and fashionable, then I think I would be happy. I mean, I would feel very confident that she would have a very rich, fulfilling life and a positive life. Then I thought, hang on a second, if I want my daughter to become that kind of a woman, that's what I want my reader to become. So from then on, about 9 years ago, that's when the magazine took a significant turn in the growth. The first year we were successful, full stop. But then it started to have a soul, a real person. I started to address the woman underneath the clothes, as well as the clothes themselves. And then gradually, the more you think about it, the more positive energy runs through the whole magazine. It's like an editor asked me, oh, shall we do this story or shall we take that picture? And my fundamental question to them would be that would that picture or that article take our reader one step closer to the ideal sort of Vogue China woman that we try to influence them to become? If the answer is yes, then it's a good article. If the answer is no, probably we should drop it.
I'm going to ask for questions in just a moment, but can I ask you?
So that sort of answer your question about
it
us.
Does.
More
I can't
than
remember what
just
the question was now, but I'm sure it does. Just before I ask it, as an editor of a magazine, especially a magazine as influential as yours is, do you feel any pressures from government, from the system, from the
No,
Communist
but
Party?
in your line of business, you would. If I were in what you
Yeah.
do, well, your life probably would. But in my no, we're only a fashion magazine.
Well. Things can change. There's a
No,
question.
it's true. It's true. The only thing I do have is there are two things usually. You don't touch on political issues, which we don't. Is a fashion because
Well, that's
it's
not why people
unnecessary.
buy the
Yeah, it's
magazine.
not why people buy. It doesn't mean I don't have my views. On issues. I have strong views on a lot of issues, but this is not where we do it. And this first, and secondly is nudity. And in China, nudity is an issue. But luckily, I have no problem with that because I believe a fashion magazine should be talking about fashion, which means clothes. And to photograph women without clothes sort of missed the point.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so.
I'm going to ask somebody called, I ought to know this as an Irish passport, Sav Lee from Ireland.
Steve Lee from Ireland, can you tell us how you pronounce your name and come and ask your question? There we go.
Are we over there yet?
I think here she comes.
Hi, it's Sive, like 5 with an S.
Sorry.
No problem.
We got it.
I just wanted to ask, without being disrespectful, do you find there's a conflict between being editor of one of the world's leading fashion magazines and also it being in one of the countries that's most abused by the fashion industry in terms of sweatshops?
Good question.
Good question. As I say, there are all kinds of problems in the world, and I'm one person, and we're one magazine. It's very hard to address every single issue and solve all the problems in the world, even though ideally we would like to. Of course, it's no good. Nobody wants to support it, but it's all equally not a good idea and not to grow the economy because these things exist. I'd like to think that things are improving. I don't know the statistics of it. I think the economy in general, if prosperity brings what? More communication and more exposure and more understanding of the wider world, which is what you see in China now. The Chinese tourists, they're starting to travel around the world. They see different ways of life, different culture, different ways of thinking that they never could 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I think that the prosperity brings in this ability, the freedom, to be able to go around the world and see different, what I described. That would open up people's mind, and they are going to become more aware of the world, more aware of the issues, and they're going to look back on how they live and think about the meaning of life, like what I do, and I encourage my readers to. So in an indirect way, I'd like to think that what we do actually have a positive impact on solving all kinds of problems in the world, but specifically, it's not something I'm capable of doing at this moment, but I am advocating for women, my readers, to become positive, responsible, passionate people who want to embrace life, who are brave enough to embrace a very individualistic personality and opinion, and to have your own opinion. I think generally speaking, that's got to be good for everybody in the country. I think when I go to bed, and I believe in that, I can go to sleep with very peace of mind.
I think one of the interesting things that I've noticed about the way that China's developed over certainly the last 15 years, is that it is much more aware of the way that it's considered, that it's thought about in other countries. And so the questions about how poorly paid workers are treated is actually not ignored by the government. It seems to me that the Chinese government rather obsesses about the way that it's portrayed and it's seen, which is one way, hopefully, towards some kind of improvement. Zhengning Wang from China. Do we have a question?
China, could we have you up to the microphone? The next question after that's going to be Nimit Mehra. So if Nimit's faster, then you can go first.
Vanished.
Just shout.
Yeah.
I think Nimit's on his way.
Okay.
And Zhengning Wang, if you can make your way to the microphone afterwards.
Hi, I'm Nimit from India. My question is very cultural in nature, not so much for fashion. Whenever, as you said, Western fashion magazine or Western magazines come into Asian countries, they try to put a cheaper version. So at 36, you were young. You were in a market which is not the major one. Did you face any resistance of the kind of content you need to put in the magazine? And how did you have the confidence to raise up and say how you wanted the magazine to portray? how did you stand up to the
Very
foreigners?
good. Yes, yeah, thank you. I mean, I actually like to see more Asian countries doing that, given, that, because it wasn't easy, I have to say. I brushed it off saying that, I always made it look like I pressed the button and we had a plan and then everything worked out. But the reality was that it was very difficult because in the fashion world, like with a lot of this creative world, there are so many egos. There are people who become successful because for many reasons they're very good at what they do, but there's also an unwritten rule about who pairs with who. Because they all mingle with the beautiful crowd, they all mingle with the famous crowd, they all, as a photographer, for example, if you shoot absolute nobody, then it would reflect badly on his reputation because, at that time, everybody wanted to shoot Kate Moss, wanted to shoot for proved successful magazines like big Vogues. So we were a young operator. So I went around, I was thinking, Condé Nast, Vogue, photographers, no problem, everybody would work for me. No, nobody did. We had the first meeting with all these agents. It was like, Angelica who? You're from China, it's a Chinese magazine. Do the Chinese understand fashion? Do the Chinese understand me? Do you know my style? Can you handle my images? Do you know how to communicate with me? How about other photographers in the magazine? If they are not good, I don't want to be in that magazine with you. All these questions, suddenly you find yourself confronted with. And my team at the time, many people just thought, forget it, just even worse, actually, expressions. Just, why do we put up with attitude? Then my attitude was that you can't take it personal. If you take everything personal, you can't move forward with business. This is business. It's a really good strategy. We have to realize this strategy. We have to find a way around it. So I spent the first year really going around, talking to everybody, getting them to understand me, getting them to have confidence in me, in the magazine, in how we approach it, convincing them we are knowledgeable enough, we have a good eye, we have a good aspiration, and we are committed to what they do. And plus, you have to learn quickly, and most importantly, your company, Condé Nast, support you in terms of the investment. They have to give you the money in order to do a better quality shoot and better quality story. So all these are relevant issues, but I feel that Asians in general need to be more confident about who we are. I mean, I was probably the first one in this category to aim high and realize it and go around the world and advocating this message. And do the other way around in China too. But I think that it's important to accept we are probably not knowledgeable enough, we are not exposed enough, we need to learn, but we need to learn quickly. But it doesn't mean, by admitting that you need to learn, it means you are inferior, potentially in future too. The right balanced attitude is the key. I always tell our editors, our young designers, Chinese designers, for example, to have a balanced attitude, to say, you don't feel insecure, but you are willing to learn. You are confident, and don't feel you are not that good, but it doesn't mean you should stop learning. But by learning from everybody and asking questions when you don't understand doesn't mean you are weak. It actually means you are strong. But you need to learn really, really quickly and be humble when you need to be and be confident when you need to be. And I think that we have that, and gradually, eventually, quite quickly, we won the respect of the people who are actually frivolous people. They were like, now they accept you, because at the human nature, you have to believe in that. We all here, we all respect people who we respect, who are strong, who are committed, who are talented, who work hard, who have good ideas. If you believe in that fundamental strength of human nature, actually, you can do it. This is what I found through my own experience.
Very, very nice answer, Angelica. We've come to the end of our session, sadly. I just want a one-word answer. Do you think you'll go and be a lawyer again now?
Oh, I don't think so. Now it's a little bit late. but now what we do, influence so many people, probably influence a lot more people than I ever could through being a lawyer. So that is the positive spin onto something. Yeah, instead of thinking what I have missed.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.